Hey, Documentary First listeners. I am excited to announce that our podcast is now officially sponsored by our friends over at Artillery Sports. And the Artillery Sports 5-star series pickleballs have now arrived. But here's the most important part, and it's what I absolutely love. With each purchase, 20% of the profits are donated to organizations that help military veterans get low or no cost healthcare. So head on over to artillerysports.com right now and use the code DOCFIRST to get 10% off your first order. Welcome to Documentary First, an inside look to documentary filmmaking. I'm your host and documentary filmmaker, Christian Taylor. My co-host, Jason Rugg, is out again this week, but he does assure me he'll be back as soon as he's able, and he sends everybody his love. So before I introduce our extremely interesting guest today and a fantastic friend of the show, I'd like to give you a quick company update. I am so excited to announce that with the help of my incredible crew and the generous support from our Patreon peeps and our generous donors, the trailer for our upcoming documentary Heroes of Carentan was released to our Patreon supporters yesterday, and it's headed for our social media channels next. It can also be found on our Documentary First YouTube channel if you want to go there right now. I'm so excited. It's 2 minutes, 19 seconds. I think you're going to love it, so go check it out. And if you didn't hear this on our last podcast, let me say it again. I am just like over the moon excited to announce that The Girl Who Wore Freedom is getting its first nationwide limited theatrical release beginning the last week of May, first week of June, in honor of the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And last, but certainly not least, in fact, is probably the most important, the Documentary First team has the privilege of taking 100-year-old World War II veteran C.O. Bauer back to Normandy this D-Day, this June. So more on that to come. It's an incredible privilege. He's never been there during the D-Day ceremonies, so it's just going to be extremely special. All right, that's the company update for now. We're going to turn our attention to this podcast today, and we're going to dive in about this theatrical release and learn more about how that, became possible. And thankfully, we have the person largely responsible for making this happen, our producer, David Paterson. So, David, we are so excited. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be aboard.
Yeah, well, it's great. You are always a super fun guest to have, and we're delighted you're here. So I am going to read your bio real quick for those people that don't know you. So hang on to your hats, everybody. This is a pretty impressive bio if you haven't heard about who David is. All right, so David is a writer. He's a professional stuntman. He's been in the business for a really long time. Also, this is not really relative to his filmmaking, but I think it's pretty impressive. He is a volunteer firefighter in New York. He is a New York Park Commissioner, and he is also a producer of film and television. He has served on film advisory boards for the Savannah, Gold Coast, and Big Apple film festivals. His films have premiered at over 100 film festivals worldwide, including a little-known one called Sundance. And his films have been released theatrically in over 125 countries. In addition to his Disney hit, Bridge to Terabithia, which many of you, if you're over the age of 30 will know, and the most recent Lionsgate release, The Great Gilly Hopkins, starring Glenn Close, Octavia Spencer, Kathy Bates, and Julia Stiles. David has produced many documentaries, including the award-winning documentary Don't Stop Believin', Every Man's Journey, and his most recent doc, I think the best, the award-winning film The Girl Who Wore Freedom. It was recently released through Virgil Films and is premiering as a spotlight doc on all Delta domestic flights this June, which we haven't said yet, but yes, it's true, and will be released in select theaters throughout the U.S. this May and June, like we have just said. So more about David can be found on IMDb or at arkadybayent.com. Incredibly impressive, David.
Well, it sounds impressive. There you go.
You have been busy over the course of your life. I'm just so privileged to know you, call you a friend, and I will say all of that experience has benefited me as a filmmaker immensely, including what we're here to talk about, this theatrical release. So why don't you give us a quick update about how you and I met? We've talked about that before on the podcast, but that was years ago. So we have new listeners since then. So let's talk about how you and I came together.
All right. Well, long story, as quick as I can do it, is we went to school together but never even met each other. It turns out we were in the theater department, which was not a huge theater department, but we literally never met each other. We had the same friends. I think we may have taken a course or two, but I was a professional drinker since way back, and so I was usually hungover in the classes and had my head on the desk rather than looking around. But many, many years later, I was reading in the CUA magazine about this filmmaker who was doing her first film ever. It happened to be Christian. And I read a little bit more about it, and it sounded very interesting. I was a history major at Catholic U in addition to being a theater major. And I tracked down her email, I think, and I shot her email saying I was reading up about you. I've made some films, including some docs. I'd happy to send you a little money to submit for documentary film festivals, and I'd be happy to give you some advice as well. And it's good to see another CUA person out there still in the industry. I think that's
And
pretty
I
much
said,
it.
why don't you keep your money? And why don't you come on board and help us and, become a producer of this project? And truthfully, that was one of the best decisions I have ever made. It was, paid off in spades because you have been just so invaluable to everything that we've been doing since then. One of your main missions has been not only to help us save money, but to figure out how to make some, which is what you have been doing. So one of the things you have been telling me from the beginning is, Christian, you've got to figure out how to do a theatrical release. And of course, I've been so busy trying to just get the film released, dealing with difficult partnerships, trying to figure out, how to get out of bad contracts and get into healthy ones and all of that. But recently, I think in 2024, you called me up in January and you said, Christian, I think this is your year. This is a special year. Good things are going to happen, and I want to help make it happen. So tell me what your thinking was and what your vision was at that time.
Sure. I think one of the most important things for any filmmaker, whether it's your first or seventh film, the two main things: you know your film and know your audience. And most filmmakers know their film pretty well. 99% of filmmakers don't know their audience. And when I say that is mean they'll say, "Oh, anyone will like this movie." Well, sure, anyone may like that movie. How do you reach that anyone? A lot of filmmakers, when they come out of a festival, they do something called four-walling, where they rent out the theater and they're in charge of filling that theater. Well, you can do that in your hometown. Get all your high school buddies or your parents to force their friends into the theater. But if you have 7 screenings, are you going to fill just 1 or 2 of those screenings with all your friends? Where do you go from there? And so it's always dangerous for a theatrical release if you're just like, oh, I know I'm going to put in there, people will come. It's the old, if you build it, they will show up. Not in film, not especially now. What you need to do is know that there's an audience, know that there's an audience you can reach out to, and know that there's an audience that you can bring into the theaters.
But
Go ahead.
no, please keep going. I will keep my questions until you have stopped. Please keep going. What were you going to say?
So I love this documentary, and I always felt that there was a worldwide audience to it. But again, how do you reach that world? That's the biggest challenge. And when I reached out to Christian at the the latter part of 23, 24, I said, this is your year for this film because it is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Now, she'd been making it for many years before and had been showing it and stuff like that. But this is where I say you feed the beast. And the beast is the entertainment industry. And it's always very hungry, but has a very select appetite. And that is cash. And whatever they eat produces cash, not poop, but cash. And so we had to approach theaters and theater owners with, we have cash for you. We have a lot of cash on the table that no one has taken off the table. And it is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Now, theater owner would say, no Marvel comic person who's going to be interested in it. That's fine. That's not our audience. That's not what we're going for. We're going for people who still like to go to the movies, who don't want to be in a room with screaming individuals whether it be a vampire movie that girls go crazy about because of the sexy guy who's in charge of it, or a Marvel movie, which is so loud you have to go in with earplugs and leave with earplugs. This is for the film audience that still wants to go enjoy a movie, not with people holding up their phones on the screen, and just relax. And that's a massive number if you reach out to say, this is your movie. Don't worry, the teens aren't going to be there. Don't worry, it's not going to be so loud you have to leave. This is your movie. There's a huge amount of theater-going audiences that have kind of given up on going to the theater because of what I just talked about. So I said, these are the folks we go after. When we were initially talking to some of these theater companies, they're like, well, it's already on streaming. And my our response was, so what? These people don't stream. And when I say these people, I'm not saying, oh, really, really creature old people. I'm talking about people over 40. They don't like streaming. They don't like looking at a movie on their phone. They don't want to look at a movie on their laptop. They want to see it, yes, at home, but also if they don't know about it, they're not going to watch it. And also, this is what we discussed as an event film. This is where you do take your family. This is where you do take your parents. This is where you take your grandparents. It's where you go to enjoy the theater together. And so that was our target audience. And that's what we explained to exhibitors. We're like, how about this? How about you show it when you don't normally show it? Show a 1 o'clock screening. Show a 5 o'clock screening. This way, your evenings are still full for those loud Marvel things or the teenage vampire movies. But you're still serving an audience that's hungry to sit in a theater and share a moment with 100 other people around them. And that's how we've actually been able to get it into theaters. We reached out to not AMC, not Regal, not the theater companies that have thousands upon thousands of screens, because that's all they care about is the Marvel movies. They all care about the wide releases. We went after the mom and pop theater chains that have 10 theaters, but each of those theaters have 5 screens. So they have 50 screens. So can they give us 1 or 2 screens around D-Day? Yes, they were interested in doing that, not simply because, as far as I'm concerned, it's the right thing to do for the community and veterans, but they too have veterans in their families. You know, majority of these mom and pop theater chains are owned by people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s whose grandparents and parents, some of them parents, were in World War II. They know the impact it had on them. They know the impact it had on the world. And this is an opportunity for them to reward not only their parents and relatives, but the community of veterans who are around them. A lot of people don't know there's still 250,000 veterans of World War II still alive in the United States. Now, 5 years from now, for the 85th anniversary, that number will probably be cut by 2/3 because most of these veterans are in their late 90s, early 100s. So this is the opportunity to really celebrate those individuals, get them into the theaters, stand up, applaud them, and see what they did for us 80 years ago.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Let's back up a little bit because I'm going to pretend like I'm not going to pretend. It's true. I am. But just a filmmaker, and you've come to me and you have said, let's do a theatrical release with your film. And I have absolutely no idea what you mean by that, how to go about that, why that would be in my best interest. Because when I heard you say that, and I have to be honest with you, I still am waiting to see if you're right because we haven't fully gone through this process. Is it going to be financially worth it? You tell me it is. We'll see if you're right. I'm trusting to believe you, or I'm trusting and I'm going to believe you. So talk to me about the process that you have mentally walked me through about why we should do this and why a filmmaker should consider going through this process.
Right. So first of all, I'm going to jump right in. Shame on that negativity that some of your
Thanks.
audience members may pick up on. Because the simple fact is we've already secured 10 different theater chains that have committed to it, 4 of which
That's true.
We already have contractual agreements to. So shame on you. because you will have a film in theatrical release.
Hey, look, I'm just the voice of the everyman here. I want to speak for our audience who is out there saying, okay, I hear they're doing it, but what about me? Why should I do that? Okay, so
Sure,
give me a
but you
little
should
bit
have
of a...
said, we are doing it. And now David will
That's true.
explain how we are doing it.
Okay, well, yeah, so we are doing it. That is correct. And, we did have to come to these theaters with a deal. And so before we reached out to all of these theaters, you had a plan. And your plan from the beginning was, like you said, to reach out to mom and pops. And then what was the next part of the plan?
Well, first of all, let's go back a little bit. 10 years ago, I would never have recommended this because of technology. Great thing about technology nowadays is anyone can make a movie. The bad thing about that is everyone can make 10 bad movies. And so there's so much more content. I hate that word, but that's the word, content out there. But there's also a lot of bad content. The positive element of that is anyone can get a distribution deal nowadays with streaming. Will you get money?
You think?
Anyone gets streaming. You didn't let me finish. She never lets me finish. I'm married, so another person never lets me finish. So I'd hope Christian will let me finish.
Sorry.
Anyone can get streaming for their project nowadays. 99% of them will lose money. As simple as that. Anyone will put your product, no matter how bad it is, on a platform. Your concern as a distributor or as the filmmaker is what platform, right? There's Netflix, there's Amazon, there's all those others. Those are the big kids. Those are the big dogs that you want. You can get it on a platform, Jimmy Joe's platform somewhere, and they promise you 90% of whatever they make. 90% of nothing is nothing. I'm fighting a cold, by the way. So that's why I'm sounding like Brenda Ficardo for you older folks who know who she is. So the other element, though, is when it comes to theatrical releasing, technology has come on our side because theaters don't want to do the old film, racking it up and doing like that. That is cost prohibitive. So they've gone into technological advances that allow you to mail a thumb drive and not a reel of film. Okay, the cost of that is astronomically lower, a thumb drive, compared to traditional film.
Or a crew drive. It's a thumb drive. If it's an MP4, it's a crew drive. If it's a DCP, or a Blu-ray or a DVD. There are several different options depending on the theater.
So you're going from 5 or 10 years ago for hundreds of dollars of deliverables to a single theater to literally sending a thumb drive or in some cases a download.
Right.
Download.
A free download, yeah.
A free download where 5 or 10 years ago, that would have cost you hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
So this is what I explained to my, I don't believe you, filmmaker. I said, if we can fill a certain number of people per theater, and I went with a low number. I said 40%, 40 people in a theater per screening, times $5 or $6 per ticket screen, which is actually super low. And you get a certain number of screenings. Just look at what's that against the deliverables. One other thing, cut that in half because half of that goes to the exhibitor, the theater company. I said, so look at that number. If you're past $1 of your deliverables to your revenue, you've made a profit. And that's how you look at it. Anytime you can say, I've made some money off of my film in a theatrical distribution, then you made money in the movie theaters. First of all, you don't even do the money thing. You say, I got a theatrical distribution.
Right. That's the second bonus. I mean, yes, you have money, in your pocket, but also you can say, I now have theatrical distribution. And I think, the interesting thing is that we just never think that that's possible. Like you always think you have to have a distributor to do this. And I think the unique thing these days is, yes, many people know that four-walling is possible, and you do four-walling so that you can have a release for your film in your neighborhood, or so that you can be considered for an Emmy nomination or an Oscar nomination or something like that. But, there's not a lot of talk about people doing what we're doing, which is going across the United States, reaching out to theaters from, east to west coast in little shops and pitching, making this pitch to them. We have this great film that will fill your theaters, that's good for your community. You're educating your community base. You are honoring a portion of your community that you're going to want to honor on this special day. It is a film that no one has seen before. It needs to be seen, and you will be able to make money on this. And not only that, we're going to sweeten the deal by doing some of your marketing for you. We will help you do that, and we'll, split the revenue with you 50-50. So I think it's a pretty sweet deal, and it's yielded good results.
And just to add on to that, talking about technological advances, when we're reaching out for our marketing and press, in the old days, that was a phone call. And back then, maybe someone would pick up. Nowadays, no one picks up the phone. But the great thing about using Google and the internet is you can actually track down contacts that are of value. And so when we talk about our marketing plan, when we talk to these theater chains, when they commit to a certain city, we say, well, this is what we're going to do for you. Not only are we going to reach out to military organizations, local VFW, local American Legion, any other veteran organizations in the area, any other Army bases, military bases or such. We'll be reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce, who's very familiar with the veteran populace. Lots of times they give them awards. We will reach out to the local universities that teach history and French and let them know about this event. We will basically, your town's a sponge, we will squeeze that dry and have all of those people that want to see this movie know about the movie. And most filmmakers just don't do that. As we said,
right.
Get a theater, hope for the best, contact family and friends and fill that. But if it's not family and friends in your town and you're talking about another town, who are you going to get there? Know your audience and go after that audience.
Now, I'm going to say this isn't easy, right? It is work. It's not like it's something that magically happens. And there have been 3 of us that have been working together to accomplish this. There is you, who is, I think, the brain of the whole operation and really doing the lion's share of things. You've done tons of researching contacts. You've looked up theaters, and it started with what? How did this whole figuring out how we're going to do this start? It started with a list.
Started with a list, and probably a very valuable list, a website called cinematreasures.com. Cinematreasures.com basically lists pretty much up to date as much as they can be every theater in the United States. And they break it down. You can break it down by city. You can break it down by theater chain. That's how I went after it. I looked at theater chains that had anywhere from 20 to 50 screens. Because again, as I said, going after the big dogs, they don't care. It's all about money. They don't care about how great your movie is or what good it serves to the general populace. They just care about money. And then I worked after going after those theater companies. Sometimes.
Right. So you went through that. You also made a chart. You're like, okay, I'm going to make this list. I'm going to make a chart of all of these people that fit this spec. So you had to do that research. We enlisted Todd Anderson, who is our marketing and sales guy, to really help us track this. That's been crucially important. I mean, that piece cannot be overstressed, because as you're sending all of these emails, and you must send many over the course of time and track them, you have to have somebody that is on top of all of the theaters, all of the emails that go out, all of the responses that come in, and we'll get to that later. Critical piece. But I mean, that from the beginning of that list, you researched all those theaters, and you started us off on that track by picking those theaters. And then you had to find the right contact information, and that wasn't easy.
No, it's not easy, because for every email you get 12 that are wrong. Many are because people change jobs all the time. And so you never know exactly how that email is. So I don't think I'm giving any secrets. There's a great website called Rocket Reach. You do have to pay for it. I know no one wants to spend money. But it does track down people's names and contact information at companies that are listed. And sometimes if you send an email to one that gets rejected, look at other people within the same company. And it is a little bit of detective work.
I would say a lot of detective work,
A
David.
lot of
You
detective work,
have
yeah.
done a lot of detective work here. And I think it's also not being afraid, because what you had to do was you wrote an initial email that was on the website or on the contact page. When you didn't get a response, you did go into Rocket Reach and figure out who was in charge. And then you wrote them specifically, which would be going over the heads of other people, right?
Yes, I would initially reach out to the president of marketing and maybe the film buyer. When they ignored me, I would write out to the owner of the theater chain and CC the people that blew me off. Now, so, those guys may have thought I was going over their heads, but I didn't. I gave them the shot first off, and then I did a follow-up. And I think half of our "yes, we'll screen it" came from me going over the heads of the
That's
marketing
right.
and the other people. Because
That's
again, the
right.
people that own the theaters had a parent in World War II, and they want to do
Right.
their honoring. And so I'm sure the younger guys or the lower guys thought I was being a jerk by blowing them off, but they kind of blew me off first. So I gave them the opportunity and then worked above them. And then sometimes on the third time around, we got someone else, because again, we would add and change out emails. Because again, some of those emails, lots of times you get back, email doesn't work. Sometimes you get nothing back, because that's just the way the internet works. And you don't know if someone was actually reached or not. So it is repeat and rinse in respects to outreach for these theater companies. If you didn't hear the first time, doesn't mean necessarily no. It means they just didn't get it. So you have to
Right.
find a new name and a new email to reach out. And then going back, even before Rocket Reach, if you Google film buyer and then the name of the theater company, lots of time that pops up. And lots of times
Yeah.
you can find that email.
Well, and I think too, persistence is key here. This is the same thing we've talked about in terms of making a movie. Now we're talking about selling a movie, distributing a movie. Persistence is key, and trying to get contact with people who might want to buy your movie. You can't just stop at one email. You have to figure out, how do you get through? And I think your persistence has been key. And then the next thing is, you can't just write one form letter. That's the other part of the work. You had to tweak every single letter to every theater, and that changed with you looked up how many veterans were in each community. You looked up, I know we were diving into, why would this movie work in this community? What
Yeah.
is it about this community that this film would really speak to? And then you would have to pitch that to them in this letter. So I think the more specific you made it, it let the theaters know you knew their audience, and then you could make a very pointed, plea or sales pitch to them about why they should show the film.
Absolutely. One, which since we're not under contract yet, even though they said they're going to show it, one of their first emails back was like, well, how many veterans are in our town? Boom. Not only we hit them with how many veterans, but also how many World War II veterans were still alive in their community that they really had the opportunity to honor. And this would probably be their last opportunity to honor them for a major anniversary. And that's one of the most important points when reaching out to these theaters. It's not me, 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 me. It's you, 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 you. This is what you can do for your community. This is what you can do that makes you look good. Because the press will say, look, this theater company did this for their veterans. And so that's how you spin it. It's not like, oh, please put my film into your theater. It's like, look how presenting this film can really put you in a great light for the veteran community and the press, because the press loves World War II veterans. So,
Well, and it's, truly, we're talking about World War II because that's our film, but everyone has to do their own due diligence with what their film is and figure out how it works in each community. But the fact of the matter is, I think as a filmmaker, when we are passionate about our subject matter, we want the most important thing over money, really, if you're in documentary filmmaking, usually is you want to get your message out. You want people to hear your story. And you can only do that if an audience is watching. And so you really do care about the community that a theater exists in. And so you do want to help the theaters help the community and get the message out. So when you're genuinely making that pitch, it is, we want to help you bless your community, and that is what you have to focus on. Why this will be good for you is because it is good for your community, and this is why. And you have to get real specific with that.
And again, since I'm always dealing with naysayers, including this young lady in front of me, a lot of independent filmmakers listening right now are like, well, I'm not doing a documentary. I'm not doing a movie about veterans. Well, you are doing a movie about something, right? And that's what you need to focus on. What's the thematic elements of your film? How can you present a community about your film? A lot of films involve the homeless, right? So that's when you reach out to homeless organizations within a community. And as in fact, what we're doing, we are giving a portion of our proceeds to charities. So you can approach the same community saying, a theater company saying, we want to do this. We also want to benefit the homeless community or homeless vet community or literally many, many different organizations, whether it's dealing with mental health issues or just throw it out there, a racing car film. Maybe there's a local race car track that would like to be a sponsor or be involved somehow. So it's not just a matter of detective work. It's a matter of dissecting your own film, dissecting your own project and saying, who's my audience and where's my audience in this specific town or community? If the guy's a history teacher, a history professor in your movie, go after the local universities and community college for the history department. There are audiences out there for your film. And you can't just go, well, I think there is. No, your movie's dead. I'm telling you right now. If you think there's an audience for your film, you put your movie away. You have to know your audience or find your audience and figure out your audience.
Exactly. David, there's this other really interesting thing that happened is when we reached out to theaters, there were responses all across the board from some theaters that said, yeah, we'll show it. We'll do it in one theater at this one specific time, to other ones that are like, we will do a whole educational program about this and we'll show it, I don't know how many times, and we'll bring school kids in. And so there was just this like huge range of different options from these theaters, who had incredible imaginations about what they could do with the film and how they could benefit their community. And others, you could tell, were just, checking a box and, okay, we'll do this for the community one time. And what we were able to do is remain extremely flexible. We will do for you, with you, whatever you want. And we will tailor this screening however you want. We will just give you the film. We'll put it in whenever you wish. Our recommendation is that you do 1 or 2 targeted screenings. Try to pack the theater and not spread it out over a week or 2 so that you get the maximum impact. And, we offer, all of this different help. However, if you want and you want to do one specific screening, if you do it at a time where our filmmaker is around, we can have a Q&A, or we can try to help get World War II veterans there, and we could make these screenings special. And we just gave them these smorgasbord of options, and different theaters have taken, different options, right? I mean, it's been really interesting to see that.
Yeah. I mean, if we look back on our list, I think we've gotten a total of 5 no's, right? It's about 5 no's we reached out to over 100 chains. Now, we didn't get through to a bunch of those, to be perfectly honest. It was just a lot of emails were blocked. We tried every avenue. I'd say maybe 35 or 40 just went nowhere. And despite our best attempts, but we were expecting that. And we said, if we get like 10 theaters interested, we'd be successful. I think we're now at, even though they're not on a contract, we're right around 20 theaters, and we're at about a little over 100 screenings that have either been promised or assured we would get. So I'm going with that, even though we're not actually set. So we always tailored it, as we talked about it, exactly to what they wanted. And when they said, okay, we'll do one, we always said, that's great. That is terrific. And somehow we would work in a reminder, that you do have 25 World War II veterans in your community. Hopefully we can get them all in at one screening or something. We always said, that's great. We also want to provide you with all the additional veteran information in case you decide to change your mind and want to expand your number of screenings. I think we had 2 or 3 decide to open up at some point from just 1 or 2 screenings to like 4 or 6. So once again, we say, look what you can do for your community. There might be a line outside your theater for this theater, so you might want to add another 1 or 2. But we did that. She's very right about that. A couple came back and said, you don't want an open run, do you? And we went, absolutely not. That's not what we want. We go, that does not benefit us, does not benefit you, the exhibitor. We are doing targeted, limited screenings in and around D-Day. So, and this is how we said it, to maximize audience attendance and press coverage. Those 2 are the sexy cash words that these theaters want to hear. They want to hear audience and they want to hear press. And so that's what we focused on. And that usually was the hook. We had thrown out the bait about veterans, blah, blah, blah. But the hook was audience attendance and press. And that's almost always when they went, okay, we're in. And then it was a matter of reeling them in on getting how many screenings they were going to show. And as we discussed before, one screening, we get 10 to 12 people in there, and it's just a download or a thing. We'll make $1.
Right.
I personally can't guarantee this, but am confident that with all our outreach to the press, the veteran organizations, everything, anything that has 2 to 4 screenings, I'm confident we'll have full houses. The ones, God bless them, that are doing larger, hopefully it's on their turf as well, so they're going to work with the marketing as well. Fridley, for example, which is doing educational screenings, they know they can fill the house because they already have a deal with the schools. And that's really cool that they're going to fill the theaters for us.
Yeah.
And again, with the students coming home, they're going to tell their parents about it. Saw this fantastic movie. So the parents are like, oh, maybe we can go see the theater tonight because they're doing morning and evening screenings.
Yeah. The other thing that's just so fascinating is, one theater will say, a bigger theater chain. And we're not talking about like AMC again. We're talking about a theater chain that will have, let's say a name, David, that hasn't committed to us yet, but that is pick a name that we looked into or that said no to us. Yeah.
That said no, but hasn't committed to yet.
Yes. Yeah. Either way.
Well, so far, everyone we've dealt with, we've had pretty much, I'm interested. So if we're going to throw out a name, Harkins.
Okay, Harkins is like a chain, okay? It's a mid-sized chain that has theaters in different places in Arizona and where else? Different states, but, in the West. And they'll say, initially we'll put it in 2 or 3 theaters, but maybe in the end, they may put it in one of their theaters. So then we went to Malco. Let's say Malco is another medium-sized theater chain with, 5 theaters in different places. I think they're in the Midwest. And we think they're going to do the same thing, 1 theater. Next thing we know, they're like, yeah, we'll put it in 5 theaters and we'll do it, 2 or 3 times a day, right on D-Day, celebrating. Bingo. That's exactly what we were hoping for.
And again, with Malco, we again made it just the way we made the worm a little bigger for them because we explain it is a family event. So grandchildren will go with their parents and grandparents. And what's great about theaters that have food as an event, if you show it at 1 and 5, people will come to eat before and after both the earlier screening and the after. That Malco just jumped right on that. All the theaters they're showing it are in their restaurant theaters. So they see big money from the dinner, but also the ability to serve the community and show a good film. So whenever we were going after theaters / restaurants, we would explain that way that, veterans like to eat. They like to eat early. So if you do a 1 o'clock and a 5 o'clock, there's a very good chance you're going to fill them for before, during, and after, so they can watch a movie they want to see while having a great meal. And again, so that's how we tailored it to all these different companies. And in fact, Harkins is one that's actually doing it in a military town, at a military base, actually, because they know they can set up a good audience there.
Yeah, and we actually had another theater, I'm not sure what state it's in, that said they're going to do it in one of their theaters that's actually on a base, which was really pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Fort Adams, maybe. I can't remember exactly. But talking about Malco, this was, that brings me to cost, because there sometimes are costs. And like you said before, there are options, and we are giving all of our theaters these options. If you have not distributed a film before or yet, when you go to share your film with anyone, they're going to ask you, how can we show this film? And so there's going to be lots of options. Are you going to show it on an MP4? So how are you going to show that MP4? Is it going to be on a thumb drive that you bring? Is it going to be on a computer that someone else has? How is that person showing the film going to get that MP4? That's one thing to think about. Do you have to send it? How's it going to get there? What about if it's going to be on a DCP? DCPs are kind of expensive to make. I think the going rate right now is around $500-ish. And then a DCP can't just be put on a thumb drive. It's a big file. And so it needs to be put on what is called a crew drive. And not everybody can make a DCP, and not everybody can put one on a crew drive or has a crew drive. They're expensive. And I will tell you, Premiere says that it can make DCPs. We found every time we tried to make one, it never worked. And so we've had to go to have those professionally done. So you have these DCP files made by a supplier. Ours is James Thayer at Seek First Productions, and we will link his information in our comments. He's a great guy. We've worked with him all along for making our DCPs and distributing them. He then, we tell him what theaters. So most recently we did this. We said, Malco Theaters has to have DCPs for their theaters. So here are the 5 theaters. These are the point of contacts at the theaters, and here are the addresses. Please send DCP files on crew drives to all these theaters. So James puts the DCPs on the crew drives, packages them up with a return shipping label, and ships them off. Well, he charges us a cost for the rental of the drive, and then he charges us shipping for that. And so that comes out to be probably around, I think it was $85, maybe each, something like that, roughly. And so there is a cost when you're sending things like that, for distributing. That's where you have to, make sure that you're making a deal that it's at least going to bring you that $1 over that cost that you're expending. The other way to do it, which has been absolutely amazing now that we have technology, James puts that DCP on a Google Drive. And sometimes theaters with good enough technology and Wi-Fi, we can just give them the link and they download the DCP files. It does take a long period of time because it's not, a small file. And that's free. Does not cost anybody a dime. And so that's the best case scenario. It's not common right now. We're finding that most people need a DCP or an MP4. So there is a little bit of cost involved, but it is getting less expensive all the time. But those are the only costs that we found so far, right, David? People ask us for posters. And so we have sent a couple of posters.
No, we did have a moment where we, as the filmmaking company, decided to turn down a deal. There was a corporate business that wanted not mention names, wanted to put it in over 50 theaters worldwide. Now that sounds fantastic. That's great PR. But they had a very regimented deliverables requirement, which would have cost us about $14,000 to.
We were going to give it to them for free.
And we were going to give it to them for free.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But then they wanted us to pay the $14,000 on top of the free.
And I'm sure you're saying, well, who is this? We're not going to say it. It would have been a great PR thing for us. But we stepped back and went, no, we're not going to lose money. And that's what she had mentioned earlier. I'm Scottish. If I lose a penny in my pocket, I don't sleep that night. So I told her when we were going to do this, any deal of any of these theaters where we would lose money, we're not going to do it because I drew a line in the sand. I said, moving forward with this is a theatrical release, not only for PR, but also to recoup. And if you as a filmmaker are deciding to do a theatrical release to lose money, you better have some good justifications for it.
Yeah.
As simple
Also,
as that.
I want you to think about, the time of year in the season. So we picked a really bad time to do this, but we don't have a choice. So our anniversary is D-Day, June 6th, which is the summer release season. It is when theaters are busy. It's a tough time to say, hey, can you let us have some time in your theater where you're not showing a big Hollywood blockbuster or something like that. But think about your own movie. Is your movie shot in fall? Maybe there is a dead time in the fall where theaters are looking for things to show. Maybe that's part of your pitch. This is a great time to show my film. Think about the time of the year that you might want to pitch your movie and when it might fit into the theater schedule. That would be another thing that I would suggest for sure. Brent, do you agree?
And yeah, I agree. And why lift your nose up at a matinee? People always are like, oh, matinee. No, it's in a theater. That's, again, how you maximize attendance. Do it on a Saturday. Do an 11 a.m. At a theater on Saturday if you can get them to do it. And then that's your responsibility to fill that because they're probably not going to guarantee to fill that theater. But if you're doing a split profit, they don't care nearly as much as if you were asking for a 7 or 9 p.m. screening any day of the week. So literally to be able to do a 12 noon matinee on a Saturday and a 12 noon Sunday matinee, that might be a far more considerable decision for these theater exhibitors than for you trying to push your way into a main lineup, which for the most part you'll always lose.
Yeah. So another thing I want to talk about and address, our film was first released when it was distributed in 2021. It was re-released in 2022 with its new distributor. So I'm going to say that was our real release in November of 2022. So it's now been out 18 months. By the time it comes out in the theaters, it will have been out 18 months. It's very unusual for a film that's 18 months old to have a theatrical release. But here it is. It's possible. And we were able to give them some good reasons why. So I think if you're thinking about your film is too old, it's not new anymore, but you want to try to come up with a theatrical release, you do need to think about some good reasons about why this might be a good time for your film to have a theatrical release, right?
Yes, and community is everything. I'm not talking just about the film community, but your community, where you live. Target the independent theaters. Don't ask AMC to give you one screen at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They're just not going to do it. But the local independent house, which supports independent filmmaking, a lot of them show movies that were made 10, 20 years ago, simply because they think there's an audience. So when you tell your community theater, I can get you an audience, A, you better do it. But B, they'll be listening. Oh, you're an local independent filmmaker? This is interesting. It's something that we support. We support independent film.
Yeah. Now, you did something interesting today, which you didn't tell me you were going to do, but I thought it was genius. So there are a few theaters that we hadn't heard from yet. And you wrote them emails again today. And what you're talking about doing is absolutely true. It's what we're going to do. But I never thought about using that as motivation or inspiration or a carrot to get them to reconsider showing the film. So talk about what you did today.
Yeah, well, we had talked earlier in the week of who we had not heard from. And these are people who said, yes, we're interested. Well, they can say that forever, but you don't want them to get distracted with something else. So, every week or 10 days, we'd reach out to them. But this time I reached out to them and did not put the blame on me. Technically it is because they know me as the producer, but also I'm also behind a lot of the marketing. So I said, we're getting a push from our marketing and PR department to really nail down the releases. We're not asking you for release times or specific dates, but just a confirmation and a commitment to screening our film. The reason is we have a press release that will be going out shortly to all the major Hollywood trades, including Variety, including Deadline Hollywood, Hollywood Reporter, Forbes Entertainment. And we want to be able to include your theater's name in that press release to show your support for not only this film, but your community veterans. And so we like that. And also, the additional element was we want to work for you on this project. So the sooner we know there's commitment and the cities that you'll be showing it, we will be reaching out to the veterans organizations, the universities, the chambers of commerce, the Kiwanis, Elks, other local organizations to let them know where and when your film will be showing the Girl Who Wore Freedom and your efforts to support local veterans. And of course, we will also be reaching out to local press, both print, internet, and television, who love stories about veterans from World War II.
Yeah.
So basically, we're asking them to jump on the train so they can be a part of it.
And we have found that, you've done the same thing earlier when you would land one larger theater. You would go to the next theater and say, so far, these are the theaters that have committed to us. Would you join us?
Yes, but none in your theater's communities.
Oh, that's right. And
as of yet. And we want to offer you exclusivity to your town because we will promise you no competition of any theaters in your town. So again, you're just making that bait bigger. You're just adding more to the hook to really make it, why should we, meaning the theater company, do it? Oh, well, they're doing this for us. They're doing this for us. They're doing this for us.
It's about them, not about us.
But it's them, not us.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. It's been a real learning experience. You definitely have a gift at this. I can tell you've been doing it for a really long time. And I appreciate you sharing your skills with us as the Girl Who Wore Freedom, but also being generous enough to come on the show and, share with our audience these tips and tricks for how to get a limited theatrical release in the United States.
Well, I appreciate it. And I will say any filmmaker that doesn't think they have anything to learn about the business probably should not be in the business because it's an ever-changing business. Everything.
So true.
The strategies we've discussed today, we could not have done 5 years ago.
No.
So the environment changes. You have to change with it.
All the time. I think if, we started these conversations, 3 years ago, maybe. And if we went back and listened to those conversations in our earlier podcasts, they probably don't even apply today. I mean, so much has changed since then. It's just crazy. All right. Well, that wraps up our conversation about limited theatrical releases. Now it is time for everybody's favorite segment, DocuView Dèjà Vu. All right, David, did you bring a documentary to share?
Yes, it's a film that I actually just recently saw with my wife. And my wife, I love her. She loves me. We love each other, but we do have very different choices in films.
You're very different people, by the way.
We are very different people, yes. Yes. She's pretty and young, and I'm old and scratchy. And actually, I kept this beard to show how old I am, to make all filmmakers feel good. But even a geezer like me can continue to make movies. But anyway, so my wife's not a big fan of docs, okay? So, she finds them drab, boring, blah, blah, blah. She loved, obviously, Girl Who Wore Freedom.
Of course.
She went to Normandy with us on one of our trips. But we did find something the other night on the screen called The Greatest Night in Pop. Now, there's just no way you can say you're not interested in this movie. It was the making of We Are the World, with all the pop stars back in the 80s, and watching the attitudes and mindsets and egos to come together for one night, late night actually, it was after the Grammys, after the Grammy parties, they came to a studio to make that song, and it has a 98% approval on Rotten Tomatoes. That's about as fresh as you can get. It's currently on Netflix, which I know not everyone has. I didn't do double, triple viewing of where else it can be streamed. But probably if Netflix has it right now, you're probably not going to be able to get it in many other places. But it's a great, great movie, great doc, great heart, great stories. So I highly recommend it.
I do too. I saw it. It was just remarkable, especially if you're of a certain age where you remember the songs in the 80s, We Are the World, because that is what they were recording. And it is narrated by Lionel Richie, who is really one of the people in charge of making it happen. And I never thought he would have been as interesting and as charismatic and as great a storyteller as he was, but he really drove the story. And it was fascinating. Even if you weren't alive in the 80s, it was a great doc.
Yeah, I just know him from the 80s, but I thought, oh, he just does American Idol, blah, blah, blah. I didn't know how intricate he was as a force of making Where the World Made. He's pretty much him with other people along with him, but he was kind of the mover and shaker of that.
He was. It wouldn't have happened without him. I'll tell you one of my two favorite people in there, Bob Dylan. The whole story about Bob Dylan and just his face and just the experience of Bob Dylan, and oh my gosh, Stevie Wonder impersonating Bob Dylan so that Bob Dylan could sing his part, and Bruce Springsteen, and everybody brought their unique version of singing to this. Yeah. I didn't appreciate it in the 80s. After watching this documentary, I really appreciated the song We Are the World, and I was listening to it for several days. It was a great doc, so definitely check it out if you can. All right, so we're going to wrap up today's episode. However, can you stay around for a few more minutes and record some stuff for our Patreon people?
I certainly could.
Awesome. All right. So we've got some special questions for David. We're going to have him stick around and talk to us about, I think, The Bridge to Terabithia and maybe some special things about his movie. And if you are not part of our Patreon community, consider joining us. We're always doing special things for Patreon. We're about to revamp it and really make it intimate and bring in, people as our creative partners. So you'll find us on Patreon as Documentary First, and we'd love to have you join us. We could use your support, and it would be fun to have you. So think about that. All right, everybody, it's been great having you and spending time with you today. David, great having you here. Hope you'll come back. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Documentary First, where we believe everybody has a story to tell, and you can be the one to tell it. Bye, everybody.